Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, stories, and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out the articles, videos, and more at passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your technical questions answered and contribute to the community forum, and of course, attend the weekly online Global Passive House Happy Hour. Now, here's this week's Passive House podcast. G'day, I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh down in Auckland, New Zealand.
And I'm Zach Semke in Seattle, Washington.
And how are things looking in the US? They calmed down a little bit climate-wise this week, Zach?
I guess it depends on what topic you're talking about when it comes.
Well, I was really talking bushfires. We'll stay away from politics for now.
You know, it's vastly improved.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, we have seen a flare-up of wildfires happen in wine country in California recently, and so we're getting some of the smoke from there, even though it's a few hundred miles away. But it's up in the stratosphere, so the air is clean enough for us to get outside and exercise and move around.
I was listening to an old podcast back from March, actually, during the week from it was a building science podcast, and it was talking all about indoor air quality. And it's fascinating to think about that, the importance of healthiness inside buildings, but also the assumption that outdoor air is always healthy, but it is not, and for a lot of people at the moment with all that smoke around. So I guess it just highlights how important it is to have somewhere where there is clean, filtered, healthy air.
Yeah, I think that's an insight that Passive House has brought to all of this for a while, and that's that natural ventilation is great if the air outside is clean. But when we have these kinds of events, we need filtered ventilation.
So this week I have an interview with Giorgia Tzar. Now, Giorgia she looks after the International Passive House Association, and they're a part of the Passive House Institute that communicates with all of the affiliates from around the world. So Passive House affiliates, they're groups like the North American Passive House Network in the US, Passive House Canada, Australian Passive House Association. Overall, there are 22 of these affiliates worldwide at the moment, and some of those also have separate smaller chapters, and part of Giorgia's role is to look after all those people, which is a bit like herding cats, I suggested during this interview, because there are people from all different nationalities in all different parts of the world facing all different challenges. The other interesting thing about Giorgia is that she probably doesn't sound German. She's based in Darmstadt, but she actually grew up in Melbourne, Australia. And quite incredibly, she took on the challenge of completing a Bachelor of Arts in Germany, completely in the German language after a pretty intensive training and learning the language. So pretty impressive. I caught up with Giorgia earlier this week, and she is right in the middle of the 24th International Passive House Conference, which looks a little bit different this year. So here is my chat with Giorgia Tzar. Yeah, and it's just such a different scene. I mean, there's pros and cons, but it's a credit to everyone to have been able to put on an international conference in these trying times. But you've pivoted and you've created something that's different and got it up and running. So congratulations to you and the whole team for that. And I think, it's obviously everyone would love to be there in person, but it presents some other opportunities doing it online.
Yeah, definitely. Our conference team, Cornelia Baumgärtner and Lucia Teiner, did a spectacular job pivoting things. Obviously, a few months' notice. We normally organize our conferences, 18 months to 2 years in advance. So it's been really, really incredible to see that. Um, and now I've totally forgotten what your actual question was.
Well, I didn't really have one, but I was just saying that it's a credit to you guys to have a conference of this scale, because I think everyone looks forward to it. It's a big event, and it would be a shame not to have it. But it was a challenge to have it. The Tell us about what the benefits you see to this type, or the unexpected benefits to having an online event. Obviously you got the virtual um, exhibition hall. You've got are there ability for is there an ability for people to network in the same way that they would in an in-person event?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, it's a little bit different. Traditionally, for example, I organized the IFA party, and this year that has to take place online. So it's all online networking this year, but there are a lot of opportunities for that. So as you mentioned in the exhibition, we have an option to get in touch with the exhibitors directly and talk about products and whatever else is of interest from that stand. During the presentations, there's a chat box to get in touch with the presenter, and also other people who are in that session who might have other further input from their own regions or own research. We also have a variety of other networking options that are for just general catch-up sessions. So we have the Passive House Cafe, which is an offshoot of the exhibition room, and there people can just meet and chat. It's much more laid back, and it's been very popular before and after sessions. It's been really lovely to see. We also have a matchmaking tool in the actual conference hub, which is much more directed at putting people together who might have similar business or general professional interests, and that's yes, so matchmaking. So it's a bit more formalized in that regard. As far as
Will any of those are those just there for the time of the conference, or will some of those be extended afterwards?
That's a really good question. So we have been testing out the Passive House Cafe, and it has been really wonderful. I don't know that there's necessarily plans to extend it afterwards. However, IFA will be going back to organising the IFA community meetups, so people will have those options to catch up in a chat and with speakers from around the world. And then, of course, there's always our webinars, and each affiliate often organises their local events as well, the Passive House evenings. So there will be continued options for online networking. I'm not sure, though, that they will be the exact same ones that we have available at the conference at the moment.
Now, you mentioned IFA, and a lot of people will be familiar with what IFA is, and also indeed you, because you have an unenviable job, I think, sometimes of herding the cats and organising all the various affiliates around the world. But can you just give an overview for those that haven't come across the various parts of the machine? What is the institute and what is the association?
For sure. So IFA, I don't think I've even mentioned that, is short for the International Passive House Association, and back home in Australia, people call it IFA, which is probably just the English pronunciation. I think I've just gotten used to saying IFA because I work with a lot of Germans. Nonetheless, we are the international network of Passive House stakeholders. So we offer a range of benefits, including, dissemination of Passive House information, discounts, presentation database, full access to Passipedia, a forum that PHI staff and experts also answer to for really specialized questions. Webinars, of course, I've mentioned those before, and just a range of other benefits. And we keep the international community together, we keep them informed, and we keep it growing. So we are much more on the advocacy and the promotion side of things, and also, of course, on the member care side. And then the Institute, which actually founded IFA back in 2010 for exactly that purpose, to look after the international community. They focus on the research, the training, and the certification of buildings and components. So much more technical, whereas we are much more dissemination and informational based.
And so, yeah, it's a network of you call them stakeholders. You've got associations from around the world who are affiliates, aren't they? So they're sort of members of the association.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a network of affiliate organizations, which currently we have 22 of them, all around the world, from Chile and South America right through North America, Australia, New Zealand, and all over Europe and so forth. And they, the motto of IFA, wow, is making the local global, or bringing the global to the local level as well. So we work as kind of a circle in that regard. We bring information from all of our international groups and members, and of course from PHI itself. And we bring that to the members through different dissemination and promotional activities, just from really, really basic things such as newsletters to larger events such as our advocacy work with COP and the Global Alliance for Building and Construction and the UNECE and so forth. And also we also bring that knowledge that is very localized to the global level as well through those activities.
Now you mentioned, 20 odd affiliates there. Does that include chapters, or are they additional to that? I was just talking to Jose a couple of weeks ago from Panama, and he's just set up the Panama Passive House group or association, but they're a chapter of the Latin America group, which is the affiliate. So do you count all those chapters as well?
Yes and no. It depends on the organization. For example, the NAPHN, they have chapters and charters. So we count their chapters because they are still somewhat independent in certain regards. And their charters we count as one large national network, which is the NAPHN.
Right. I mean, it's pretty exciting stuff. And mention talking of the South American groups there and some of the other newer groups, there's a lot of variety in climate zones, which I'm particularly interested in, particularly some of those more humid tropical climates. And I think it's really exciting to see those groups come together and kind of learn from each other to talk about how to apply Passive House to regions outside sort of Central Europe and North America.
Yeah, certainly. As you know, Passive House is internationally applicable. It's not a design standard. It's a performance, building performance standard. So it is applicable across different climate zones. And that's definitely a large aspect of that with the network, bringing people together with their different experiences of Passive House across different not just climate zones, but also architectural styles. Obviously, one of the benefits of it being a performance standard is that people can still maintain their architectural heritage and their designs. So that's also been very, very interesting to see that applied as well. Actually, a very interesting article on that. We recently interviewed Miva Mori for our series on women driving the Passive House industry, part of the IFA blog. And she talks about this in detail in Japan, how it's both got a strong architectural heritage that people want to maintain, but also that they have a very hot, humid climate, and trying to meet in the middle to achieve the Passive House standard, but also make sure that those two aspects are considered.
Where can people go to find out more about that? And you mentioned the IFA blog. Where is that?
So the IFA blog, you can actually find a link to it on our website. But otherwise, if you just type in International Passive House Association blog, it generally comes up on Google.
Cool. And yeah, for those that haven't navigated around, there are good interlinks between the Passive House Institute and the Passive House Association, so you can jump in, between those pretty easily. Hey, coming back to the conference, it's the 24th International Conference, gone back to Germany this year after having, there were two conferences last year, weren't there? You had the
one in Heidelberg and one in China. Yeah.
Heidelberg, yeah, and then the big one in China. What have been the standouts for you so far? Any highlights for this year?
There's been quite a few. The opening plenary had some really interesting talks. We had Stefan Ramsdorff from the Potsdam Institute talking about climate change, and a really detailed, interesting presentation. We've had quite a few sessions so far. This week we will start from the halftime plenary, followed by sessions 7 to 11. But I think my favorite session last week that I watched was probably on NZEBs, which is the nearly zero energy building conversation that we're having here in Europe, and how Passive House is applicable to that. And it was very, very interesting to see the conclusions that Passive House is always a nearly zero energy building, but nearly zero energy buildings are not always a passive house. And then that in most, if not all cases, the passive house building was more cost efficient for local designers, and of course also for the people at the end of the day paying for those buildings. So really interesting things coming out of the different sessions. And Aoife, while I mentioned it, has been live tweeting a lot of the sessions just to highlight some of the really interesting things. And so that because during the conference we have two sessions running, we have two sessions a day on Wednesdays and Thursdays, one in the morning and one in the evening. And each session has two different topics running at the same time. The benefit, though, of, you asked this before, of the online conference is not only that it's therefore more internationally accessible. People don't need to fly. People don't need to take time off work and so forth. But also the sessions are recorded. So if two sessions are at the same time and you really wanted to see both of them, you can just watch the recording of the other one after the fact. And it also means that if people have missed the first week, it's not too late to join in. They can still grab tickets. They can watch the recordings from week 1 a little later and just join in from week 2 and 3 for now.
Do you think doing events like this is going to change how we do international conferences and networking from now onwards?
I think it will change the number of in-person events, I suspect. It has really highlighted something that I think deep down we all knew, that we don't need to go to absolutely every conference in person. But there is definitely some aspects that get lost in an online conference. As I mentioned, we're not doing the IFA party, which is really just a time to let your hair down. It means that conferences are much more focused on the learning and the much more targeted networking aspect, whereas in person they can be slightly more relaxed, I guess. So I think it'll be a bit of a mix. I know that. Yeah. I know that I'm hoping. Yes.
Having been to a couple of the conferences, it's been a privilege to be there. Those after hours events are definitely a bit of a highlight. They're always a great cultural experience, but a fantastic networking chance. As a lot of conferences are, that's where a lot of the connections happen. Is the after hours.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is hard to do online. It's hard, but I think you're right. I think there are opportunities to connect professionally with some of the content and share some of that technical information. And I quite like this format of shorter days but spread out to give people time to connect, but then also appreciate they're sort of carrying on with their day jobs as well.
For sure. And that was really, that was a process deciding on how to best do that, because conferences, they eat up a chunk of time. You at the start of the year, you have to make an active decision which conferences you're going to attend. And especially this year with so much going online, had to be very respectful of people's schedules and things. And also because we have a lot of international participants and they're at home at the moment, we have a lot of time zones. So we're spreading it over 2 days a week, and also we've got recording options so people can watch it at times that suit them. If the morning session happens to be at 2 a.m. for Perth, then they can watch it a little later when they wake up.
Yeah. Perth is one of the trickiest time zones to coordinate, I have to say. It's they're right out there.
I've never succeeded in a Perth meeting so far. No. I'm always like, when will you be back in Melbourne?
No. we love you, Perth. There's some great passive house projects over there. Now, in terms of the content and the trends, the general trends that you're actually seeing on the ground, the buildings, the projects that are being talked about, anything exciting there? Any highlights that you're seeing and the general state of passive house, maybe around Europe, but also from other parts of the world?
Yeah, for sure. There's some super exciting projects, and they're also being presented at the conference on various days. So there's the first passive house in Saudi Arabia, which is obviously a very hot, dry climate. There is one in Thailand, which is obviously hot and humid. And then there's a range of others, really tall buildings coming up, which has been a very popular topic in the last few years. And then especially in Europe, but I think it's generally of interest around the world, is the topic of retrofitting. And in session 7 this week, which is actually our first session with different presentations for the week on Wednesday, we've got a whole session on different benefits from around the world. And there's been a lot of research on that in the last few years, but also a lot of really impressive, interesting projects. And then on Thursday in the morning and the afternoon, we have a session on passive house solutions, where we often have, problem solving issues where it's a question of, what does passive house for the Mediterranean climate look for? Or how do you deal with commercial kitchens in the buildings? And so we have a session covering all of those different and unique situations where the presenters have come up with solutions. And then later we have a session on passive house training and education. This year especially is very interesting because the Institute is expanding its range of training options to include a larger range of building professionals. And then we have, of course, the tall passive house buildings. And the main topic, I think, in the last few years is summer comfort and resilience. So a full session on that and how to deal with a warming climate and what that means for passive house.
Wow, there's quite a lot there. There's something for everyone, I would suggest. Now, a little bit of jargon. NFIT that's for rating a building to a standard that is an existing building. So you're taking it up to not quite the same requirements as a new passive house, but it is a standard. Is that a good summary?
Exactly. So NFIT is the passive house retrofit standard, and it obviously considers the challenges that come with improving the energy efficiency of an existing building. That building might be facing a less than ideal direction, or it might have an enormous basement, or a variety of other things that might create hurdles to achieving the full passive house standard, which is intended for new builds. And thus we have that. Although I would say we have a lot of NFIT projects that do just amazingly well. So it's not impossible, but we just recognize the challenges and as such.
And it's so important. It's because all the buildings exist already. All the ones that are in existence already, and it's pretty resource heavy to knock them all down and start fresh. So we need those solutions about how to retrofit existing buildings. So it's very exciting to see people take on those challenges. You mentioned other training options as well. Could you give us any Any previews of any of that?
I can. I would have to double check because I've not been too involved. But for example, last year we already launched the PHPP expert courses. And then there's going to be some courses on retrofit expert, site supervisor, construction verifier,
Awesome.
and also on a component consultant. So real range of different aspects of building and design to factor in the fact that the situation that there are so many people involved in the construction of a passive house, and they need certain training for their aspect of the job as well.
And are those training courses that are provided around the conference, or is that material that will be distributed throughout other training providers throughout the world?
So those are the training offers. So at the moment, there are a range of different course dates throughout the year offered both by the Passive House Institute and by our many training providers around the world. I'm not sure that there is actually a training offer in direct connection with the conference this year. There are, however,
right.
definitely workshops, especially in week 3. We have one on cost-efficient social housing, which, yes, definitely also a very interesting topic and one that's become more and more important in the last few years.
Yeah, excellent. And I mean, people can, I imagine, just keep an eye out. That's fantastic that those other offerings are coming through for increasing the uptake across the whole industry. Like you say, it's so many people are involved, not just designers and builders, but getting everyone upskilled on those various parts. I really like that PHPP training as well, because I know from it's all well and good knowing the science, but you got to know how to operate the tools as well to their maximum benefit. So it's great to have that training in place as well. Where to from here, Giorgia? You're obviously not quite finished the conference at the time just yet, but looking ahead to 2021, hopefully beyond COVID, what's the future looking like?
We've got quite a lot on. Even before 2021, we have the November Passive House Open Days from the 6th to the 8th of November. So that's a worldwide event where we encourage passive house owners and building users to participate. This year, we took the June Passive House Open Days online because of obvious health-related concerns. But as things haven't quite cleared up in every country, we'll be taking the November ones online as well. And as the June ones were so successful, we had a lot of submissions. We asked everybody to send through video tours of their passive house building. We will be doing that again, accepting video submissions, but we're also hoping to put on a variety of live events over that weekend. So Q&A sessions and info sessions as well. Hopefully some panel discussions and some live tours too. We had quite a few people offer live tours in the June Passive House Open Days, and it's a really good opportunity for people to say, I couldn't quite see that detail of the ventilation system. Could you explain why you chose that? Yeah. And it's also, I mentioned before, we're doing the EFA community meetups. Those will start up soon again, and we do them twice a month on Mondays. And those are an opportunity to keep the community together. And so these events that we organize are really, really important. I think especially this year, not just for opening the doors to the public on Passive House, but also on making sure that we maintain that sense of community and we maintain that joint goal for better buildings.
And then fingers crossed for a more traditional physical international conference for 2021?
Yes, I certainly hope so. We obviously, with everything, it's all touch and go, but we do certainly have plans to make it a live event. And we'll see how things go, I guess. Who would have thought that we'd be almost at October and this is still going? I guess probably health experts knew that, but I can't say I'm a infectious disease expert, so I was really hoping to be normal by
No,
Christmas.
no, but it certainly has shone a light on the health of the places where we spend a lot of time. And I think a lot of people are starting to think more and more about indoor air quality, health, comfort, and energy efficiency. So all that is something that Passive House can definitely contribute towards improving. So um, while I wouldn't wish these situation and what people are dealing with on anyone, hopefully there will be some downstream benefits for the way people are thinking about at least the way we're designing and building buildings.
Definitely, and especially talking about air quality and health. There's been a lot of research pointing that out that passive house ventilation systems, they are ideal in any situations like a pandemic because you have air exchange and you have
Yeah.
filters and things. And also, it just reminded me. So we also, in the Passive House Summer Comfort and Resilience session, we also have a talk on smoke infiltration and specifically bushfire smoke. And you and I are both from Australia,
Yes.
so that might be of interest to people. Talking about not only how
Well, and west coast of the US, I know have been a huge issue for them recently with wildfires up there as well.
exactly.
And there has been quite a lot of discussion on the benefits of having an airtight building with a really good ventilation system, and that is a definite strategy for having better indoor air quality in those
For
environments.
sure. Yep. And I highly recommend, checking that out because it has been a question that we've received a lot, especially this year. And I think that's applicable to a lot of different places.
Absolutely. Hey, well done, Georgia, to you and the whole team. And I really appreciate your time because I know it's you're right in the thick of it right now. So thank you for coming on and giving us some of that valuable time. And keep up the good work.
Yeah, happy to join. Thanks for the invitation. And come join us at the conference if you haven't already. It's not too late. And if you are interested in more about what we do at EFA and becoming a member, or looking for a local affiliate to become a member of, because we do offer a 2-for-1 membership if people join through their local group. So who doesn't like a good deal there? Get your local information and also get secondary international benefits as well. Then do get in touch with us. My colleague Carl and I are always happy to answer any questions and to help out the Passive House community.
And that was Giorgia Tzar. She is part of the Institute and she looks after the International Passive House Association from Darmstadt. And as I mentioned at the outset, the International Passive House Conference looks very different this year, being virtual. And Zach, you've been to a couple of real life conferences before.
I have. I was at the Innsbruck conference about 9 years ago, and at the Munich conference that happened 2 years ago.
And have you been tuning in to some of this year's virtual conference as well?
I have been. And it's easy to fall behind because there's just so much fantastic content coming at us. And so I think it's important for us to remember that we've got some time. When we register for this conference, we have access to the recordings. So I'll be spending some weekends getting caught up. But these conferences are always such a shot in the arm to hear about the progress that's happening around the world. And I was, really struck by the explosive growth in components and certified passive house components that are happening in China. The last couple of conferences have highlighted that, and this is true here as well. And that's really heartening to learn about. I was really impressed by a all wood construction passive house district in Germany that was just really bringing the design qualities of this community to a really high level, and also using low embodied carbon materials. That was really inspiring. I'm really curious to hear about the Outfit program, which is a program of PHI's to chart a pathway to affordable and scalable deep energy retrofits. And we all know how vitally important deep energy retrofits are to our efforts to decarbonize the built environment. So I'm super excited about that. So just a lot on tap.
That came up in the Global Happy Hour this week, didn't it?
I learned about that from Monty Paulson. And Monty also moderated a panel today about tall passive house projects, so high-rise passive house
Yeah.
that I'm really looking forward
Yeah.
to checking out. So Bronwyn Berry said that tweeted out that today was full Monty, but with clothes on, because we had lots of great stuff coming from Monty today.
Actually, that's a really good point. If you're ever struggling to keep up to date with anything, just follow Bronwyn on Twitter, and she's like a constant thread of up to date news stories. Because if you're like me and you're out of that time zone, it is a bit of a challenge to keep up with all of the sort of fire hose of information that's coming out of these events. It's great that it is still carrying on, though. They've done a great job of getting it up and running, changing the format slightly, stretching it out over a longer period of time because people aren't there as intense. But I have also heard that some of those breakout sessions or some of the networking opportunities, and then you've got the expo space where you can jump in and actually have a look at these virtual exhibitor stands. They're all kind of working. Not the same as being there in person, but they are working.
Yeah, I've been meaning to check out the Passive House Cafe and connect with folks there. And, it's just great that so many of the organizations that are part of our larger Passive House world are exploring and innovating around ways to connect in this time of COVID. And I think I feel really fortunate, and I'm happy that IFA is doing such a great job with this conference. In providing ways for us to connect.
Yeah. And that was an outtake as well from that conversation, not just about the conference, but about that growing number of affiliates around the world and in different climate zones. And I think that's really exciting. We talked a little bit about the growth of Passive House in tropical areas and in warmer climates. And it's great that some of these fledgling associations are just a couple of people that start out in one area, but there's this whole pool of knowledge that they can learn from other parts of the world and connect with those. And that's part of Giorgia's role is to connect those people up, but also with the affiliations and these conference and events and the happy hour and other resources on the accelerator. It just enables that connection. People can get started and get moving faster.
Yeah, absolutely. And experience curves are really powerful in driving costs down and uptake up of new technology. So the more that we're able to share in our innovations and lessons learned, the faster we're going to accelerate the uptake of Passive House. So it's really important.
All right, we got a bunch of events. Obviously, we've got the conference still going on for another week at the time of recording this, but there's a bunch of other things coming down the line as well.
There are, and we just released a video of the Passive House Component Spotlight that we held last Friday with a week ago Friday with Zola Windows, and Zola focused on their UPVC window options. Really looking at the options for multifamily and budget projects. So combining high performance with cost-effective solutions for Passive House projects. So you definitely want to check that out. And I'll have all the information about these announcements in our show notes as well. Lots of fall conferences coming up. And in addition to the International Passive House Conference that's underway right now. So there's a Zero Carbon Conference going on October 7th and 8th. The South Pacific Passive House Conference is right around the corner starting October 12th. Passive House Maine is presenting its fall forum October 21st and 23rd, and they'll actually kick it off at the Passive House Happy Hour on the 21st with the keynote being presented at the happy hour itself. And in Spain, Plataforma PEP is doing its conference October 21st, 22nd, 28th, and 29th. So lots of great stuff there. Also, lots of course, Passive House and Building Science gatherings happening, virtual gatherings, including the happy hour, but also the NAPHN lunchtime special with Ken Levinson and others, including the BS Fridays with Dave Cooper and Mark Wiley. So you'll want to check that stuff out. We also have FIAS doing a week of evening hootenannies in October that is sure to be a must-see series. that'll include basically roundtable conversations from architects, from builders, and from others. This is taking one of the best and most popular elements of the in-person FIAS conference and presenting it to us virtually. So you'll want to check those out as well. Next week, we have a couple of really great accelerator events coming online. Our happy hour on Wednesday will feature James Gepner. You may know James from his work at Erase 40, where he was really looking at how our understanding of behavioral science can impact and kind of help us come up with ways to spur on change, behavioral change, and market transformation. Well, James is now at NYSERDA. He's at Retrofit New York, and he's applying that knowledge to help Retrofit New York propel its programs and move the industry toward scaling up retrofits in New York. And then, of course, all of us can learn the lessons and hopefully apply them elsewhere. So that should be a really interesting presentation this coming Wednesday, and is one of two retrofit presentations we're doing back to back in the happy hour. So the next week's happy hour will feature retrofit work and a presentation by the Rocky Mountain Institute. Then on Thursday of this coming week, we're holding a special roundtable discussion called Passive House on the Front Lines, Wildfire Smoke, and Indoor Air Quality. And this is going to feature stories from Passive House residents and what they're doing to adapt to these really intense wildfire and bushfire events that are going on around the world. So we're going to have three homeowners or residents of passive houses on the West Coast present their solutions and lessons learned in terms of dealing with the smoke, and then also a resident in Australia talking about how they adapted to the bushfires. We know that passive house and its air tightness and filtered ventilation is a key step toward indoor air quality. We also know that when we have these really intense outdoor air pollution events, that more filtration is necessary. And so we're going to learn about that at that roundtable. So we hope that you'll join us. We'll have information in the show notes. Thank you.
Yeah. Wow. So much going on, and some really topical stuff there too, which is great. And some good diversity. Well, that's probably us for this week. We've got some great episodes coming up based around those topics and others, and also tapping into some of the speakers coming up for that South Pacific Passive House Conference, which I'm excited about. So who have we got to thank to take us out, Zach?
The programs of Passive House Accelerator, including the Passive House podcast, are made possible by generous support from our sponsors. Our founding sponsors are Baxt Ingwe Architects, Mitsubishi Electric Trane HVAC US, RDH Building Science, StoCorp, and Zola Windows. And our stakeholder partner is NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Thank you so much to our sponsors for making our work possible.
Thank you, and thanks to all our listeners. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to being back again next week on the Passive House podcast.